Every gardener who has ever dealt with stubborn, depleted soil knows the frustration of watching compost disappear, mulch dry out, and earthworms vanish just when you need them most. But there's a lesser-known method, one rooted in the practical ingenuity of early agriculturalists, that creates a consistent moisture pocket underground. This pocket becomes a refuge that earthworms flock to and remain in, right where plant roots need them most. Today, we're breaking down how this moisture trap works, why it succeeds even in harsh climates, and how you can build one in a single afternoon using materials already on hand. For anyone fascinated by historical farming tricks and survival-grade soil restoration, this is one of the most reliable techniques you can apply. Worms don't move through soil randomly. They follow gradients, moisture, temperature, and organic scent trails. Food attracts them, yes, but food means nothing if the soil around it is too dry for their skin to stay hydrated. This is why so many gardens that receive good compost still fail to establish stable worm populations. The soil dries out at the surface faster than decomposers can work through it, forcing worms deeper and away from roots. The moisture trap solves this problem by creating a semi-permanent humid zone that draws worms upward and keeps them anchored near the root layer. This concept was used in many older subsistence gardens long before commercial fertilizers existed, especially in regions where rainfall was unpredictable and soils dried quickly. By using controlled moisture pockets, farmers essentially turned the ground itself into a worm magnet. Setting up a moisture trap begins with selecting the right buried material. The simplest and most effective moisture trap uses a porous, slowly decomposing material buried at root depth. Well, you know, historical records and modern tests both show that rotted wood-hollowed sticks, punky logs, and partially decomposed bark can hold extraordinary amounts of water relative to their size. When buried, these act like micro-reservoirs. They absorb rainfall and irrigation water, then release it slowly back into the surrounding soil. To create your trap, just dig a trench or a series of holes roughly a hand-span deep around plants or along a bed. Place softened, spongy wood inside. If you don't have rotted wood, you can soak dry sticks in water overnight to make them more absorbent. Cover them with soil, then add a thin layer of compost. Within a few days, the buried material begins regulating moisture like a wick, keeping the soil consistently damp in a way mulch alone cannot achieve. Once the reservoir is buried, worms will naturally begin clustering around it as moisture levels stabilize. This effect becomes even stronger when small amounts of organic scraps or compost fines are added above the buried wood. The worms will come for the food, but they remain because the conditions allow them to safely digest and reproduce. Dry soil kills worm populations quickly. Stable humidity allows them to develop multiple cocoons, creating long-lasting colonies. You've essentially created an underground shelter that protects them from drying winds, sudden heat waves, and inconsistent rainfall. The difference in worm activity around a moisture trap versus an untreated bed becomes obvious within 3 to 4 weeks. Worm castings appear more frequently, soil texture becomes looser, and root depth increases as plants encounter air pockets, channels, and nutrient-rich granules created by the worms. Now, many gardeners try to bury kitchen scraps directly, but this can lead to odours or attract pests if it's done improperly. When combined with a moisture trap, though, scraps break down much more efficiently, since worms are already congregated in the area. The key is moderation. Chop vegetable scraps finely, mix them with a handful of soil, and bury them just above the buried wood layer. The moisture already present ensures that the scraps decompose instead of rotting anaerobically. Worms migrate upward to feed, then return to the reservoir zone to rest. This upward-downward movement aerates the soil naturally. In survival gardens, where no compost pile exists, this method turns every bed into its own processing unit. Over time, you'll notice that the buried wood itself breaks down and becomes a sponge-like humus, further enriching the soil. You know, forests manage to keep really dense worm populations going, even when people aren't involved at all. It's because all that decaying wood, the heavy layers of leaf litter, and the way the soil surface is protected, well, it all creates just the right sort of moist conditions that worms absolutely love. So, the moisture trap, it basically recreates this whole system, but on a much smaller scale, right in your own open garden. And here's the thing. In hot regions, that buried reservoir is brilliant for stopping extreme evaporation, while in cooler places it helps buffer the soil against those sudden temperature swings. It's really quite clever, actually. With enough buried material, entire beds can become self-moderating, requiring less watering while supporting more life. Even raised beds, often too dry for worms, respond remarkably when moisture traps are installed beneath the planting layer. Gardeners report needing less irrigation overall, yet seeing more worm castings and healthier root systems. You can, integrate moisture traps into nearly any setup. If you're planting a tree, bury a ring of rotted wood around the drip line to create a worm-friendly moisture zone. If you're preparing a vegetable bed, just dig a shallow trench, fill it with softened sticks, cover it, and plant directly above. For container gardens, it's a good idea to place small chunks of rotted wood or, partially decomposed bark at the bottom third of the pot. This helps keep moisture regulated and also keeps worms active, which is just brilliant. Even survival gardens, where, no commercial inputs are available, benefit from this simple, low-resource technique. It turns kitchen waste, fallen branches and old logs into long-term soil infrastructure. It's really quite a clever way to make the most of what you've already got lying around, if you ask me. This method isn't a trend or a gimmick. It's actually a revival of an older logic, One that understood worms will only work for you if you first create the environment they can survive in. That's just common sense, really. When you stabilize moisture, you stabilize the ecosystem. It's as simple as that, and it makes all the difference, honestly. If you found this guide useful and want more historical, tested, field-ready soil techniques, don't forget to subscribe to FarmLab and share this video so others can learn these reliable methods too. It's always better when good knowledge is passed along, isn't it?